That's very important. Having your mission statement, having clearly defined, but then taking that and saying, what one metric can we do to quantify how well we're doing at fulfilling our mission?
Look into his eyes. They're the eyes of a man obsessed by
success.
Eyes that mock our sacred institutions. Bedroom eyes, they call them in a bygone day.
Sex desire is the most powerful of human desires. When driven by this desire, men develop keenness of imagination, courage, willpower, persistence, and creative ability unknown to them at other times. So strong and impelling is the desire for sexual contact that men freely run the risk of life and reputation to indulge in. When harnessed and redirected along other lines, this motivating force maintains all of its attributes of keenness of imagination, courage, etc., which may be used as powerful creative forces in literature, art, or in any other profession or calling, including, of course, the accumulation of riches. Napoleon Hill.
Hey there, peeps. This is Michelle Nedlack, and I am super glad that you're here with us today because I am here with my amazing guest, Chris. Chris, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So give everybody the 5,000-foot view of who you are and what you love to do.
Yeah, so I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, sold two of my own businesses. And I'd say probably the thing and I'm a location independent entrepreneur, so I love traveling the world. I love adventures, snowboarding, skydiving. Those are the things that really, turn me on. I would say though, my kind of genius super skill is organization. And whether that comes from managing, I'm also polyamorous, so I have lots of women in my life. So organization is very helpful for managing lots of women at the same time. It's very helpful when I go inside of a business and I see all the different moving parts, having all the experience that I have, and I can just know, just like, oh, this needs to go here, this needs to go here. So I apply, it helps in writing. So organization's my super skill, and I apply it in a variety of areas of life.
Nice. We are going to absolutely delve into that on so many levels, but let's kind of back up the bus a bit. How did you get into organization as a thing? Like, how did that become your jam that you decided I got to help people?
It was just I would do it as a kid, and I would have constructs and I would build things, and then I'd always set up my room in a certain way, like everything was always in its place. So it was just a thing I naturally did. And then I would go and just, when I was working, doing my own business, I just organized, built systems in my own different companies. I also had this drive, right? So I had my drive to make money. Like I wanted to have the things that I wanted. And so I was like, I got to have my own money, because my parents who didn't have a lot of money growing up. And so that's what drove me to being an entrepreneur. And then just naturally being an entrepreneur, I applied the skill of organization.
Very cool. So who do you love to work with? Who's your ideal clients right now?
Yeah, there's really two types of pain points that the clients I work with have. So I'm working with CEOs, founders, people that have companies that are typically in the 1 to 10 million revenue range. And there's two primary pain points. One, they feel stuck because they know they have so much potential. They know they have such a great idea, but for whatever reason, they've been stuck at the same revenue range for too long, and their growth has stagnated. The second is a leader who feels overwhelmed. Their business is skyrocketing, and there's so much going on, and that actually you could sell yourself into failure if you're not on top of the operational infrastructure. So our niche is operational scaling, and so we help those who are overwhelmed make sure they're putting the foundation in place at a pace fast enough to keep up with the growth. They don't sabotage their own success.
Nice. I love that. So what do you see as some of the problems that people get into when they're at either one of those phases? And we can look at each one separately and then go in. But when they're stagnant and not getting enough, how does organization help them to start getting it?
Yeah. When they're stagnant, not getting it up, it's the blue pill that we hook them up with Many times, actually, interesting enough, is self-love, right?
What?
Love is going to help you get it up, right? And so, it could be you're having trouble delegating, trouble letting go. It could be money issues with money and self-worth. Sometimes it could be a combination of like actual business knowledge and not knowing who the right person to bring is, right? Actually, I'll talk about a specific client without saying names. So they're 2 million in revenue, and they've been going up and down, stuck at this for like many years, 5 years. And so we uncovered it was a lack of business knowledge. This person didn't know who to bring in to help operationally them to scale. The other issue, there was boundaries. There was a boundaries issue personally, and she would keep people on longer than was necessary. And so a lot of times effective boundaries is or deeply rooted in a lack of love. And so we use the tool LQ, love quotient, to guide people to more deeply loving themselves, which has an impact on their bottom line so they can get it up. So self-love, we use self-love as a tool with LQ, which actually, so we use love to directly impact bottom line results and make more money.
Nice. Okay, so now we're going to delve into this because you've been talking about boundaries, love quotients, and polyamory and how it relates to business. And my brain went, that is kind of a perfect analogy of how to run different departments. This is awesome. So we can take this kind of anywhere you want to go with it, or give me kind of the top line, kind of downward looking at your business. If you were to look at each department as different relationships in your life, I'm not saying girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever's, that are pertinent to you. If you had them going on and you had to please everybody all the time, so to speak, you need to have those boundaries in place so that you're not overwhelming yourself, because I personally believe that's the reason why most people get into monogamous relationships, is because they just can't handle the idea of figuring out how to please somebody all the time, which is so wrong in so many levels. So you can take whatever you want out of that little rant, take it wherever you want to go with it. I am totally cool with that.
I've had these thoughts myself, just as I've reflected. So first, I just want to say, from a business perspective, polyamory, I wouldn't say necessarily has anything to do with I keep those are very separate things in my life. But conceptually, theoretically, it's an interesting conversation.
As a metaphor.
It's fine. I've never really talked about this. This is fascinating. It's funny. I've had that thought as so for me to be polyamorous, I had to, I went through a very deep experience. I was in prison for 19 months, and that just blew me open, blew my heart open. I completely surrendered spiritually, and had my heart broken into a million pieces, and those pieces never reassembled. And those pieces were my heart walls. And so what that enabled me to do was very deeply love multiple women at the same time and not have it be confusing for me inside. And so as I was thinking about polyamory in business, well, I love my clients, obviously different ways, but I have multiple different clients and I'm servicing them each at different times, and I'm creating systems and structures to create more value so they can create better results. And I was like, wow, it's a similar thing that I'm doing in managing multiple different romantic relationships. I got to watch how much time I'm giving. I got to make sure that I'm not talking, not sharing certain things that are confidential from one person to the other. I still got to make each woman feel special in her own unique way. And I was like, wow, there are some very interesting similarities between polyamory and just business.
Right.
And then I was like, well, why do some people who have multiple, people have multiple clients, why do they have such an issue against having multiple romantic relationships? And here's the core thing, the conclusion that at least that I think is that because when your romantic partner is with somebody else, it brings up insecurities about you. Am I not good enough? So it's insecurity on a personal level is one of the things I think that keeps people back. And then, of course, how do you deal with jealousy and envy and all these other things, you got to have the right emotional tools to be able to do that. Now, that doesn't happen in business because these are two different emotional dynamics that
But
we're
are
talking
they
about.
really? Because when I was younger, I had a manager once who always played favorite to her most recent hire, to the point that anybody that had been hired before the new hire was like the ex-girlfriend and had to stick around and kind of get the shit and abuse from, like, oh, you didn't do your job right, so now I'm bringing in this one. I
Wow.
think there's a
That's
high
shitty.
correlation between
Okay.
how somebody deals in the relationships in the personal world and with their management team or their sales team, or they're like, oh, you're performing better than the rest of them, so we're gonna kind of shame them and make you the star partner for the day.
Yeah.
Like, there are
see
so
that.
many aspects that you can get away with in business that you can't get away with in your person. Well, I guess some people do.
Mm.
I see it as almost
Fascinating.
as a direct correlation. If you can't handle your intimate partnership at home, you're probably having a shit show at work.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I wouldn't, they say how you do one thing is how you do everything. I don't
Not
fully
completely.
agree. Yeah, because like you
Yeah.
can be tight in one area, right? Like you can like there's people who've been super successful businesses and are on top of it in the business realm, but yet they have monogamous relationships and it's more chosen out of fear and pain than like really choosing something. And so I agree with you that there's definitely similarities, but there also can be, those differences.
Awesome. That's why I'm bringing them up. We want to know how you think. So take that conversation anywhere you want to about.
Yeah. Well, I think the core, I did a lot of personal development growing up in my 20s and a lot of mindset stuff. Like most of the personal development world to me is in the mind. Let me shift my mind. Let me state change. Let me not think negative thoughts. Let me not get into negative emotions. And I found that to be, all of it is to be in control, right? You want to be in control of your thoughts, control of your emotions. You can be in control of your state so that you can stay on your path and create the life of your dreams. Like that's what I was taught from all the personal development I did. And what I realized, and this was mainly one of the big realizations that came to me when I was going through prison, was these techniques don't work in prison, right? Like I don't want to state change. And so what I realized was I chose to go into the pain. I chose to go into the negative thoughts, but I didn't go in it. I went in it with love. Like love was my tool. I was loving myself along the way. And what I realized is how, like they say that control is the master addiction. And I realized how much I was trying to be in control and just how I realized like how really not in control I was, right? And one of the things I realized was the greatest illusion is that you're actually in control. Right? Like, no, like I had no idea I had done anything illegal. I had no idea I was going to get picked up off the plane flying in from Puerto Vallarta into Los Angeles, picked up by the Secret Service, and then put into prison, not able to get bail, had to go with a public defender, and like found myself stuck in prison for 19 months. I had no idea that was going to happen. I didn't even know. Wasn't trying to do anything illegal. And so I realized how out of control, not in control, I really was.
Well, I ran a company called Success Therapy, and we have a whole process of going into the mind and why you want to kind of get rid of certain conditioning and all that kind of fun jazz. We could have an entire conversation about that. But I want to swing you back into the other side of the gate and talk about when you're working with somebody in business, how does this mindset thing play out, and how much is it an ability to be able to, let's talk about boundaries, because I think that a lot of people have a lot of confusion around what a boundary is. Some people think it's like, I need to be an asshole because you crossed my boundary. Some people think it's like, hey, this is where this is crossing the line, and if you cross it, then there's going to be consequences. And some people are like, well, people don't need boundaries. They should really be just allowed to flow and be them, and all sorts of fun jazz around it. So talk to me about how you work with people in boundaries and how it pertains to work.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll include boundaries as a thread, but where I was headed with all of this
Yep.
was setting up the stage, like the mindset, what traditionally I think most business owners have around this mindset. And then what I really discovered was the answer to solving the majority of problems, one which could be the actual root of why boundaries aren't there, which was I realized that trying to be in control was not the answer. And I realized that the more deeply I loved myself, the more deeply I connected with myself, the more free I actually felt and became. And that the main reason I would operate and act out in certain ways was because of unloved and unembraced aspects of self. It wasn't that I needed to try to think differently or avoid different things. In fact, the amount of control that I needed, that I was trying to exert in not thinking certain things or not doing certain behaviors, was actually a reflection of how deep of pain there was underneath the surface, right? So to even kind of frame this up, we all have throughout our child development years and our teenage years, there's parts of ourselves that get wounded, not enough love, shamed, whatever, like all this internal stuff. And then our egos are here, or we need to have a healthy functioning ego to help us navigate and get the things that we want in life. And so to the degree that our egos are functioning in unhealthy ways is a reflection of how much unloved and unembraced aspects of self. And so tying this psychological framework to business, when we're in business and let's say there's unhealthy boundaries being implemented or being expressed, there is a lack of transparency, there's inappropriate communicate, whatever the dynamic is in business, many times it's not because the owner doesn't know or the person doesn't know the right thing to do, the right way to do it. It's because they don't have access to it. It's because there isn't the space to take the action which they've known and probably been told many times to do. And so when you come in and we could even do a little exercise on this now if you want.
Yeah.
All right. So I want everyone on this call, I want you to think of an area that just a pattern that just keeps playing out in your life that's creating a lot of frustration. And so we're going to focus on a particular emotion. I'm going to focus on frustration. So like, let's say there's something that you keep doing or a situation that keeps happening where you are frustrated. One of the first ways to actually break into that is just loving the one who feels frustrated. Because as long as you're staying in a state of frustration, it doesn't give you access to actually get underneath and love the particular parts of self that actually need to be loved, to actually stop the pattern. So one of the first places to do is to actually love the one who feels frustration. So very simple thing to do. You just you can just close your eyes, take your attention and put it into your heart, into your physical heart space. And you can just repeat after me. To the one who feels frustrated, I love you. To the one who feels frustrated, I love you. I love you. I'm just giving you a little taste of that, but that's the process of what you could spend minutes. I encourage all my clients to spend 5 minutes a day, and there's particular areas that we focus, bringing your attention into your heart and loving the part of self that feels a certain way. And that creates massive, massive results because it creates a new space to be able to be present and to be with certain emotions or to be with the root causes that keep causing certain patterns to play out.
Absolutely. Nice. So, and again, when somebody's in business and let's say they have different departments, start with that because these are people that they have to interact with every day. They have a quote unquote committed relationship with them. They probably signed a contract that says, hey, I will work for you and you will pay me.
Yes.
How in those moments, and obviously there's going to be different frustrations with different people, some frustrations with people that aren't doing enough work, some people are doing too much work and they're not delegating properly. Like there's different aspects of why that frustration might come up for them. How do you recommend dealing with that?
Yeah, so there's several different components here. The first one is making sure there's very clear roles and responsibilities. So each person in your organization, make sure you have it written out very clearly what those are, and then make sure that that person clearly understands what their roles and responsibilities are. So that's the first component. The second component is making sure that there's very clear metrics and accountabilities for what they're supposed to be doing on a daily basis, right? If it's sales and marketing, that's a little bit more clear in terms of how to determine metrics. If they're in operational roles, depending on the size of your organization, that could be a little bit more difficult to actually quantify. Now, as you start getting in larger organizations, there becomes more clearly quantifiable operational metrics, but typically under 10 million, one of the easiest ways to do it is, you're using a project management system and you're tracking the fulfillment of objectives and metrics. Are you getting things? What percentage of the time are you getting things done on time? What percentage of the time are things getting delayed? What percentage of the larger projects are happening there? And so sometimes there's always a way to put metrics to somebody's roles and responsibilities. So we call that RRA, roles, responsibilities, accountabilities. That's the first thing. Second thing is, as a manager, whoever the person's, making sure there's very clear who that person's reporting to, and make sure there's consistent and ongoing accountability. Once a week, once a month, whatever is appropriate. Hey, are you doing what you're supposed to do? Looking at the metrics. Is there anything that you need to be supported in your role, right? So accountability management from the person that they're reporting to. Then, of course, how the culture is and the mission, vision, and values, how all that is clearly defined and how that's been communicated, not only as part of the hiring process, but just as part of the culture. All of that makes a difference to how somebody actually ends up performing inside of an organization. And I'm going to give you one thing right now that I have found to be the most powerful in actually creating performance and creating a powerful culture. And that's what I call the mission metric. So most companies have a mission, or at least an idea of what that mission should be. Many companies, though, especially under 10 million, still haven't fully clearly, it could be of different variations, or it's not, everybody doesn't know it. That's very important. Having your mission statement, having clearly defined, but then taking that and saying, what one metric can we do to quantify how well we're doing at fulfilling our mission? And there's an article on my website, wiseprofits.net, under the blog section where you can, if you want to read this article to get the full description. But when you can get one metric to match your mission, then you show how then you talk to everybody in the organization. You say, this is what you're doing on a daily basis, and this is how it impacts that mission metric. Because whether it's from the bookkeeper to the customer service, to the sales and marketing, to customer fulfillment, you can show and communicate and make sure how everybody understands how what they do impacts that one metric. And then this becomes a very powerful way for your entire team to get behind one metric that's different than revenue, because revenue is so impersonal. But now they can clearly see a mission metric, because a mission has purpose. It's the very reason why they're doing what they're doing. And this becomes a very powerful way to bring cohesion and team alignment.
Nice. I love that. So give us an example of a Cinderella story of one of your clients, where they were at before working with you, and because of working with you, where they gone.
Yeah. So this one client I started working in 2017. They were doing right under 1 million in revenue. It really took 9 months to get them. There wasn't really a major increase in revenue that year. We started at the beginning of 2017, but in 2018 we doubled revenue because of our focus is operational scaling. We're putting in infrastructure, we're making changes, we're doing these things that may not directly and immediately impact revenue, but there's a compounding effect. We're setting the stage, we're building the foundation. Not only did we double revenue, we also doubled profitability. They had never even really keeping an eye on profitability. And a lot of times just the very simple fact of looking at a metric begins to make a difference. It's very interesting how just watching something, talking about it consistently actually makes a difference. It does. The following year, had an 80% increase, doubling of revenue, profitability increased a little bit. And then the following year, we had a 50% increase in revenue, and profitability went down a little bit. But we had already doubled and increased. So I was like, oh, we're in the optimal range for profitability, but revenue continued to increase. And so this is a pretty well, that's one of the more we continue to grow. But doubling revenue has been a pretty standard result after, I would say, a minimum of working with Wise Profits for 6 months, and then just continuing a very consistent pace of growth. Not doubling necessarily doubling every year, but when somebody's had all this pent up energy and potential, usually doubling and then doubling, and then it can if this, of course, if you're not infusing capital, these are for bootstrapped types of businesses. If you're infusing capital, you absolutely should expect different results. But these are for more bootstrapped, organically funded businesses. And then typically after, some significant doublings, 1, 2, maybe even 3 years in a row, then I would say on average, we're seeing anywhere from 10 to, 40% or 50%, depending on the business, of consistent growth from there. But it's stable, it's paced, it's managed, things are flowing. Of course, there's always problems. But business can feel fun. I love clients who see their spiritual evolution as a function, like they're here to evolve spiritually, and business is the role that they're playing that out in. Those are my favorite clients because they get the game of evolving as a human being in the function of creating a fuck ton of profit.
Nice. I love it. You're preaching to the choir. Keep it up. You're doing awesome. Hey, so normally I would ask you what kind of stumbling blocks that somebody's going through right now that they're going, oh my God, Chris, I need you so badly. Is it necessarily just, hey, the business is either stuck or bolts are flying everywhere and I can't make it stop? Or is it, I just feel out of control of my company, or is there something else?
I think those are 3 really good spots. If you're somebody that knows, like, two other things. I want to make sure I'm not making mistakes. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. I want to make sure that I'm positioning myself for the greatest success. If you're having those thoughts, that's another reason we should talk. And if you're also knowing, like, I actually don't have the experience to take this business where I know it can go and I want help. So those are 2 other thoughts that you might be having that we should just have a conversation.
Nice. I love that. So I know that people are going to want to hear and get more from you. So how did they begin their journey with you?
Yeah. So our website's, it's wiseprofits.net, and you can check that out. There's a contact form on there. If you're interested in a mini scaling assessment, it's 10 questions, super quick and easy. And it will also just give you some insight into, is your business really ready to scale? It's wiseprofits.net/scale, SCALE. Take that mini assessment, and then we're happy to have a conversation and review it with you and talk about it more if you'd like.
Very cool. I love that. So I have to ask you, you mentioned it earlier, but at one point in life, did you know that you were that special kind of crazy enough to think that you could become an entrepreneur?
I don't, it was 12. I mean, it was never even a thought. Like, I was born an entrepreneur. So now what I would say, though, there was many times where I doubted myself and questioned myself, can I keep on this path? And that was probably I had those doubts probably for 10 years. Can I make this happen? Should I go get a job? Blah, blah, blah. And at a certain point I said, fuck, I'm making it. I've made it this far. I could do it. Because what's so interesting, I think, about entrepreneurs who are really entrepreneurs, you just fucking figure it out. You just fucking do it. Like, and you prove this to yourself when the shit hits the fan and you're like negative in your bank account and you're like, I'm not fucking going back to a job. I'm going to fucking figure this out. And you do. Like, you just do. Like, that's the beauty of being an entrepreneur. You just fucking figure it out. And if you're listening to this as an entrepreneur and you've had that confidence, keep building on that confidence. And if you're somebody who's an entrepreneur and you haven't hit that spot and you've jumped back into the cradle, I would say that's the grit, because there's a fucking grit to being an entrepreneur. And you can develop it, but it takes balls and it takes risk. But if you do, like, shit happens when you really just say, I'm going to make it happen.
Nice. I love that. There is a magic that happens that can't happen any other time other than in that moment.
Yeah.
Breakdown or whatever you want to call it, but answers will come. Fear not, people. Awesome. So any last words for our peeps? You've been awesome.
Yeah, I love it. I love this. I wish I could be on podcasts like this all the time. I think entrepreneurial, the thing of making money, it's a creative force. Being an entrepreneur is a creative force. And it's the same, like sexual energy is also, that's a creative force too. Spiritual is also a creative force. It's all sexual energy getting expressed in different ways with different boundaries. And I would just encourage, my purpose as a human being on this planet is to inspire others to follow and pursue their desires so that you can have the life of your wildest dreams in all areas. I want you to have a life where you have an incredibly successful, profitable business as much as you'd like. I want you to have a life where you're spiritually connected and grounded and continually growing, because that's a process that never ends. And have a sexually rich life where you're fucking as much as you want and you're having as much sex as you want. And I think that's I think sex and money are the two biggest areas and desires that get chained. And I hate that. And I just want to give you, everyone who's listening to this right now, I want to give you permission to enjoy and embrace your desires, and especially your sexual desires, and especially your money and wealth desires, because those are good and healthy. The desires are good. How you pursue them could be unhealthy. And that's where coming and loving and embracing those unloved aspects of self come into play are so important. Because if it's you're pursuing those in unhealthy ways, it's only because there's unloved and unembraced aspects of self. And so the problem isn't the desire, but that's where the world gets it wrong. They make the desire wrong, not how it's being pursued. And so I want you to have all that you desire in the healthiest and most conscious ways. And there's your permission. There's your access. Go make it happen.
Love it. You are awesome. We will definitely have you back on the show. Peeps, if you have questions for Chris, one, go to his website and go and ask him directly. That's if you have pressing questions, go and press up against Chris. He will love you for it. And feel free to let us know, and we will have Chris back and we'll go further and deeper into this conversation, because I love it.
Balls deep. Balls deep. Let's do it.
Awesome. This is Michelle.
Maybe next time we do the back door. Next time we got to go to the back door.
There you go. So Michelle Nedelec, I am your mistress in business. Thank you for being here today. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast so that we can help you get it up when you need to. We love having you here. Thank you for listening to the Little Blue Pill for Business podcast with your mistress in business, Michelle Nedelec. Why are you still here? Go to littlebluepillforbusiness.com and get your goodies. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to share it with somebody else that you know would enjoy getting it up in business after you subscribe to the podcast, of course, so you won't miss any future episodes. Now, check the notes for links. Oh, and only tell your wife if she's into this, entrepreneurship. And I'll see you both on the other side.